Hey everyone, it's time for the next episode of the ARIO Gateway Ops video series. And today I'm really excited because we're finally installing our gateway and getting a taste of the Permaweb. Last episode, we configured our Raspberry Pi's hardware, installed Ubuntu Server 22, updated our server, and set up the software prerequisites like Git, Docker, Node.js, and Yarn. Now it's time to clone the codebase, make some configurations, and let her rip. So let's go. So I'm back on my desktop connected to my Raspberry Pi over SSH. First step is to clone the ARIO node codebase from GitHub. If I had a dedicated drive for my app, I'd clone it there. But in this case I don't. So I'm going to make a new folder at the root of my drive called ar-io-node and use Git to clone it there. Easy enough. So now let's explore a couple of the configuration files that we have at our disposal. First, there's the Docker Compose YAML file. This is a standard configuration file used for Docker Compose, and it contains various settings related to the gateway's network services, data volumes, and environment variable mappings. We don't have to change anything in here right now, so let's close it and create our environment configuration file. I'm going to use sudo nano .env. This file contains all of the configurations we want to apply to the gateway, like where to store local data, what unbundling filters to use, the Arweave Name System settings, and more. We're just going to use some basic settings for today, really to just get our gateway up and running. So let's cover those now. First, we're going to set the public Arweave wallet that will identify our gateway and be broadcasted publicly on the ARIO network when it comes in the future. Next, let's set where our data will be stored. Even though we're using a single disk, we want to separate our data from our app directory. This will make it easier for me to manage growth and perhaps expand to a second disk in the future. I'll set the chunks, contiguous files, and headers data path to a new directory. Finally, we'll want to set our sandbox protocol to HTTP, since we're going to set up HTTPS in the future. There are other settings that you can change in this file, so check out our docs portal at ar.io/docs to learn more about them. For now, let's save it and make sure to create a new directory for our gateway's data. So we're finally at the point where we can build the codebase for ourselves. Building the code allows you to make further adjustments, like for example, modifying the count of results returned per GQL query. We won't be doing those kinds of advanced things now, so let's just give the out-of-the-box code a shot. We can install it by running sudo yarn install. Okay, now that it's built, we can initialize the databases by running sudo yarn db:/migrate up. Once that's done, we can run some basic tests. Let's do sudo yarn test. It's okay to see some failures because these are related to performance. Ultimately, this is a personal gateway for me, so I'll accept that it's going to import transactions a little bit slower than a more powerful server. So let's try to start it up by running sudo yarn start. Now there are a few things to note upon the first start of your gateway. The gateway is going to listen on port 4000 for requests for data, GraphQL queries, or any other API. It will immediately begin synchronizing and indexing layer 1 transactions. The first few transactions on the Weave are from the Genesis block, and you might have problems synchronizing them, but that's okay. I'm going to stop the server though and run it as a Docker container instead. I'm going to run sudo docker compose up-d-build. -d will run this in the background in detached mode. This ensures that I can exit my terminal and my node won't stop running. Docker also includes Envoy, a load balancing service used for external client connections over port 3000. This leaves port 4000 open for internal testing use only. Now it's going to take a few minutes for the first Docker container to build, so let's just be patient. So once that's done, I can view the logs and check for any kind of errors that I might see while I'm testing out the gateway. I can check those logs by running sudo docker compose logs -f -tail equals 0. Okay, well, it looks like it's doing what we'd expect for right now, so let's test it out. So I've opened a browser and I should be able to access my gateway via its local IP address and port. First, I'm going to access the root info page. This is going to display some basic information about the Arweave network. Next, we can check some metrics by adding /metrics to the end. Now there's a lot of information here, so we're going to save analyzing it for another time. So far so good, but let's do one more basic check to ensure GraphQL is working. I can connect to my gateway's GraphQL playground by going to /GraphQL. Let's do a basic query for some L1 block data that should already be indexed by now. Alright, so GQL is returning some results. Now let's try to load something from the Permaweb. Each time I hit a piece of content, my gateway will pull the transaction data from my trusted gateway connection. This is currently set to arweave.net, which is the default for ARIO nodes today. So first, I'm going to view an older Layer 1 transaction. Okay, now for a Layer 2 data item. All right. So now for our favorite, an Arweave manifest. An Arweave manifest is a mapping of Arweave transaction IDs to friendly names and paths. This map is put into a standardized JSON structure and permanently stored on Arweave. ARIO gateways interpret this structure and render transaction data by their friendly paths instead of their transaction IDs. This enables not just aggregations of data, like for NFT collections, but the creation of full Permaweb sites and apps, all of which can be rendered by and locally cached by my gateway. So let's check it out. Okay, here we have the rdrive public site, which has been permanently stored on Arweave. Not so bad. Now let's try the rdrive decentralized app. All right, looks like I've got the corner of the Permaweb that I'm most interested in right now. I'd say that this was a successful configuration and deployment of my ARIO gateway. There are probably lots of other tests you can do to make sure it's working for your needs, but I think the basics are complete. Now currently, all traffic from clients to my gateway is unencrypted, so I still need to set up SSL. And these transaction IDs are pretty tough to remember, so I'm also going to need to set up the Arweave Name System. Now, we're just going to have to save these configs and more for the next episode. Has this series been helpful so far? Leave us some comments below or join our Discord and tell us how your installation and testing has gone. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.